Some stories find us when we least expect them. This one came to me from a small town in Pennsylvania, told by a woman who had nearly forgotten how to hope. It is not a tale of grand adventures or faraway places. It is simpler than that, and perhaps, because of its simplicity, it strikes closer to the bone. This is a story about what happens when two broken souls meet at the exact moment they need each other most. About the quiet courage it takes to keep going when everything tells you to stop. And about the truth that many of us discover only late in life. Sometimes the things we rescue end up rescuing us. If you have ever felt invisible, or wondered if your best days are behind you, I hope these words remind you that miracles do not always come with trumpets. Sometimes they come with 4 legs and tired eyes. The chain would not give. Dorothy Miller knelt on concrete that burned through her slacks, her 71-year-old knees screaming against the heat. Late September in Pennsylvania. Indian summer, folks called it, and the sun hung stubborn and mean over the abandoned industrial lot. Her fingers, trembling the way they always did now, worked at the rusted padlock. A nail tore. She did not stop. The German shepherd lay 3 feet away, motionless. Flies circled the raw patches on its coat where fur should have been, the chain thick, the kind used for machinery, not animals wrapped twice around its neck and bolted to a steel beam. Someone had left water, days ago, maybe. The bowl sat empty, crusted white at the edges. Dorothy's breath came shallow. 40 years as a nurse, and she knew what she was looking at. Dehydration, infection, the faint rise and fall of the rib cage that said alive but whispered barely. The dog's eyes opened, not startled, not hopeful, just open, watching her with the flat gaze of a creature that had stopped expecting anything from the world. Dorothy's hands went still on the lock. She had seen that look before. 3 years ago, in her own mirror. "Don't you quit on me," she heard herself say, voice cracking on the words. Not yet. She was not sure anymore if she was talking to the dog. Wherever you are reading from today, a kitchen table, a favorite chair, a quiet room, I would love to hear. Drop a comment and let me know. After all, the best stories are the ones we share. 6 hours earlier, Dorothy had stood in front of the bathroom mirror, watching her hands shake. It was not the cold. The house held its warmth well enough. Even now, with the furnace Harold had installed 20 years back. No, the tremor came from somewhere else, somewhere medicine could not name and doctors could not fix. She gripped the edge of the sink. The porcelain was cool under her palms, in the glass. A woman she barely recognized stared back. When had her mother's face replaced her own downstairs? The radio played something with violins. She kept it on all day now, all night sometimes. Not to listen, just to fill the rooms with something other than her own breathing. The kitchen waited for her the way it always did. 2 mugs on the counter, 2 spoons. She had stopped trying to break the habit, every morning for 43 years. She had made coffee for Harold. Her hands remembered even when her mind told them to forget. She filled both mugs anyway. The second one she set on the table across from her usual chair. Steam rose and curled and disappeared. She did not look at it directly. Looking made it worse. Through the window, the backyard stretched out in tangles of brown and green. The rose bushes, their rose bushes, had gone wild 2 summers ago. She could see the red blooms fighting through the weeds. Stubborn things that refused to die even without tending. Harold would have hated it. He had been particular about the garden. The phone rang. Dorothy knew before answering. Sunday, 10:15. Sarah called at 10:15 every Sunday, regular as church bells. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "Fine, honey. You sound tired." "I'm fine." A pause. Then, "Mom, have you thought any more about what we talked about that place in Harrisburg?" The one with the garden view. I said I'm fine. The house is too big for one person. Michael and I both think, tell Michael I love him. I have to go. She set the phone down. The radio played on. The untouched coffee cooled across from her. Dorothy looked around the kitchen at the cabinets Harold built, the curtains she had sewn, the scuff marks on the floor from 30 years of children and dogs and life. Fine, for what? The question sat in her chest like a stone. That was when she decided to clean out Harold's closet. The closet smelled like him. Dorothy stood in the doorway of the bedroom, hand on the frame, breathing in cedar and old tobacco, and something underneath that was just Harold. 3 years, and his scent still lived in the fabric of his shirts, the wool of his sweaters, the leather of the work boots lined up neat along the floor. She had not opened this door since the funeral. Her fingers found the light switch. The bulb flickered once, twice, then held. Rows of flannel and denim hung from the rod. His good suit, the navy one he wore to Sarah's wedding, pressed against the Sunday shirts he never liked, but wore anyway because she asked. Dorothy pulled a cardboard box from the hall closet. Her hands did the work while her mind floated somewhere above, watching from a safe distance. That was the only way to do this. Stay outside yourself. Keep moving. The work shirts came down first. She folded each one the way he liked. Creases sharp, collars flat, into the box, then the sweaters, the jacket with the torn pocket he kept meaning to fix, at the back of the closet, behind the dress shoes. She found the toolbox. She knew that toolbox, knew the weight of it, the rattle of wrenches inside, the dent on the corner from when Michael dropped it down the basement stairs at age 12. The lid had a label. Faded, but readable, Maxwell Hardware, Meadowbrook, Pennsylvania. Harold's father's store, closed 40 years now, but Harold kept the tools like relics. Dorothy lifted the box onto the bed, opened it, ran her thumb over the handle of a screwdriver worn smooth from decades of use. These she could not throw away, but she could not keep them either, not if she was leaving. She loaded everything into the bed of Harold's pickup, the old Ford he bought in 1987 and refused to replace. The engine turned over on the third try. The cab smelled like sawdust and pipe tobacco. Her hands found their place on the wheel. The seat was still adjusted for his height, pushing her too far from the pedals. She did not change it. The drive to the municipal dump took 20 minutes. Out past the old mill, where the road turned to gravel and the houses thinned to nothing. The dump sat on land that used to be a steel plant, acres of concrete and rust slowly being swallowed back by weeds. Dorothy parked near the drop-off area. No attendant today, no other cars, just crows picking at something near the fence line and the distant hum of the highway. She pulled the first box from the truck bed, set it on the ground, stared at it. This was the plan. Leave the past here. Go back to an empty house and wait for Sarah to call again. Wait for the conversation she had been avoiding. Wait to be moved like furniture into some room in Harrisburg where she would sit by a window and watch other people's gardens grow. A sound cut through the silence. Metal on concrete, a scraping, dragging rhythm. Dorothy turned toward the old plant buildings. Nothing moved. The crows kept picking. The highway kept humming. The sound came again. Closer now, from behind a pile of broken pallets and rusted drums near the collapsed loading dock. She should get in the truck, drive away, call someone. Instead, her feet carried her forward. The smell hit first infection, waste, something rotting in the heat. Then she saw the chain, thick and orange with rust, running from a steel support beam to a shape on the ground. A dog. German shepherd. Or what was left of one. Ribs, like fingers pressing through skin, patches of fur missing, replaced by raw pink wounds crusted with flies. The chain wrapped twice around its neck, tight enough that the skin had grown around the links in places. Someone had put a water bowl nearby. Empty. Bone dry. Dorothy's nurse training kicked in before her fear could catch up. She catalogued severe dehydration, probable sepsis, muscle wasting consistent with weeks of starvation. The animal should be dead, by every measure she knew. It should be dead. But the ribcage moved, shallow, slow, alive. She took a step closer. The dog's eyes opened, not startled, not aggressive, flat, empty. The eyes of something that had given up on being saved. Dorothy looked at the chain, looked at her shaking hands, looked back at the truck where Harold's toolbox sat in the bed, where the bolt cutters his father used to stock at Maxwell Hardware waited beside the wrenches and screwdrivers. She could call animal control. They would come. Eventually, take the dog somewhere clinical and clean. And then, because nobody wanted a dog this broken, this expensive to fix, they would do the practical thing, the merciful thing. They would call it. Dorothy thought about mercy, about practical decisions, about sitting by windows in Harrisburg. She thought about the way the dog's eyes had opened when it heard her footsteps, not hoping, just checking, just seeing if this would be the thing that finally ended it. Her feet were already moving back toward the truck. The bolt cutters were heavier than she remembered. The bolt cutters bit into the chain with a sound like a gunshot. Dorothy flinched. The dog did not move. She repositioned the blades, hands slick with sweat, and squeezed again. The handles fought back against her grip. 71 years old, arthritis in both thumbs. She had no business doing this. The chain held. She adjusted her stance, knees grinding against the hot concrete. The smell of infection thick in her throat. She could taste it now, copper and rot and something sour underneath. One more squeeze, everything she had left in her arms. The link snapped. The chain fell slack. The dog's head dropped to the ground, still breathing, still watching her with those flat, empty eyes. Dorothy set down the cutters and moved closer, slowly, the way she used to approach patients in the psych ward, back when she worked nights at Meadowbrook General. No sudden movements, no loud sounds, just presence. "Easy now," she said. Her voice came out rough, scraped thin by the heat. "Easy." She reached for the chain still wrapped around its neck. The links had worn grooves into the skin, some scabbed over, some fresh, some infected yellow at the edges. Whoever had done this had not done it quickly. This dog had been here for days, maybe longer. Her fingers worked at the coils. The dog's breath hitched, but it did not snap, did not growl, did not try to pull away. It just lay there, letting her hands do what they would. The chain came loose. She pulled it free and threw it aside. The clatter echoed off the concrete walls of the ruined plant. Now she could see the full damage. Ribs like a washboard. Hip bones jutting sharp beneath dull. Patchy fur. Sores on the belly where it had lain on the hot ground. The back legs looked wrong. Muscle wasted. Joints swollen. Dorothy sat back on her heels. The sun beat down on her neck. Sweat dripped from her chin onto the concrete. She could not carry this dog. She knew that. 80 pounds? Maybe. Even starved as it was. Her back would not survive it. Her knees barely survived kneeling. But she could not leave it here, either. The truck. Harold's old blanket behind the seat. The tailgate that dropped low enough to slide things onto. She pushed herself up. Her vision went gray at the edges. She waited, one hand on the steel beam, until the world steadied. The walk back to the truck took forever, each step deliberate. The blanket was where it always was, wool, green and brown plaid, smelling like motor oil and cedar. She had tried to throw it away once, could not do it. She spread the blanket on the ground beside the dog, worked it underneath, inch by inch, rolling the animal gently onto the fabric. The dog whimpered the first sound it had made. Not a warning, just pain, just acknowledgement. Dorothy gripped the corners of the blanket and pulled. Her back screamed, her shoulders burned. The dog slid across the concrete on the wool, leaving a wet smear on the pale surface behind them. At the truck, she lowered the tailgate flat, pulled the blanket up and onto the bed, dragging the dog with it. The motion took everything she had. Her arms shook. Her breath came in gasps. But the dog was in the truck, on Harold's blanket. Its nose twitched, smelling the cedar. Maybe the oil. The ghost of a man who had owned this truck for 35 years. Its tail moved. One small twitch, then still again. Dorothy climbed into the cab, started the engine. The road back to town stretched out through the windshield, shimmering with heat. She should go to Dr. Brennan's clinic. She knew that. The dog needed fluids, antibiotics, probably surgery. It needed things she could not provide with a first aid kit and 40-year-old nursing knowledge. But she also knew what would happen there. The look on Dr. Brennan's face when he saw the extent of the damage. The gentle conversation about quality of life, the recommendation she had heard before, in other contexts, with other creatures too broken to fix. Humane, they would call it. She turned left instead of right. Toward home. The laundry room was the coolest spot in the house ground floor. North-facing window, tile floor that stayed cold even in summer. She spread old towels on the tiles, filled a shallow bowl with water, found the oatmeal in the pantry and cooked it thin, the way her mother used to make it for sick children. Getting the dog inside took everything she had left. Pulling the blanket through the back door, across the kitchen, into the small room beside the pantry. By the time it lay on the towels, Dorothy could barely stand. She sat beside it anyway, back against the washing machine. The dog's breathing had steadied, still shallow. But even now, regular. She rested her hand on its side, felt the ribs expand and contract, the heart beating beneath. "You need a name," she said to the dark room. "Can't keep calling you dog." The house settled around her. The radio played faintly from the kitchen. She had never turned it off. Some old song with violins. She thought about the dog she had loved as a child, back in Ohio. A shepherd mix who slept at the foot of her bed and growled at thunderstorms. Her first friend, her first loss. "Max," she said. The name felt strange in her mouth. Old, borrowed. The dog's ear twitched, just slightly, just enough. Dorothy closed her eyes. When she opened them again, pale morning light was creeping through the window. Max had not moved, but his eyes were open, watching her, waiting. The first day, Max did not eat. Dorothy knelt on the laundry room floor with a bowl of thin oatmeal, holding it close enough for him to smell. His nostrils flared. His eyes tracked the bowl, but his mouth stayed closed. His head flat against the towels. She dipped her finger in the oatmeal, brought it to his lips. He turned away. "All right," she said. "We'll try again later." She filled a medicine dropper with water instead, tilted his head, let the drops fall onto his tongue. One at a time, the way she had done with newborns in the NICU decades ago. Most of the water dribbled out. Some of it he swallowed. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The second day. Dorothy drove to the pharmacy in town. She moved through the aisles with purpose betadine, sterile gauze, antibiotic ointment, medical tape. The young pharmacist behind the counter watched her pile the supplies on the register. "Got yourself a dog, Mrs. Miller?" Dorothy looked at the girl. 25, maybe. Name tag said Jessica. Probably did not remember when this pharmacy was owned by old Mr. Hendricks, who knew everyone's prescriptions by heart. Something like that, Dorothy said, at home. She laid out her supplies on a clean towel. Max watched her from his nest of blankets, eyes tracking every movement. His breathing had evened out overnight, still too fast, but steadier. She started with the neck wounds. The chain had cut deep in places she could see the edges of tissue, pink and raw beneath the scabbing. She cleaned each wound with betadine, working slowly, narrating her movements the way she used to with frightened patients. "This is going to sting, I know. I'm sorry, almost done." Max whimpered when the antiseptic hit the open flesh. His legs tensed, but he did not snap, did not pull away. She worked for an hour, cleaning, debriding, applying ointment, covering what she could with gauze. By the time she finished, her knees ached and her hands were cramped into claws. But the wounds were clean. That was something. On the third day, Max licked the oatmeal. Dorothy had almost missed it. She was changing the towels beneath him, lifting his hindquarters carefully, sliding fresh fabric under when she heard the sound, a wet, tentative lapping. She turned. Max's tongue was moving across the surface of the oatmeal, slow and uncertain, like he had forgotten how eating worked. She did not move, did not breathe, just watched. He managed 4 licks before his head dropped back to the floor. Exhausted. Dorothy sat beside him for a long time after that. Her hand rested on his side, feeling the ribs expand and contract. In the kitchen, the radio played something with a piano. "That's a start," she said quietly. "That's a start." By the end of the first week, Max could lift his head on his own. Dorothy kept a notebook now, an old one she had found in Harold's desk. The pages yellowed but blank. She wrote down everything, what Max ate, how much water he took, the condition of each wound, any changes in his breathing or behavior. Day 7. Ears up when I entered the room. Ate 2 spoonfuls of oatmeal mixed with boiled chicken. Neck wounds showing pink tissue healing, back legs still weak. She read the entries at night, sitting in the kitchen with her single cup of coffee. The second mug stayed in the cabinet now. She was not sure when she had stopped setting it out. The second week. Max stood. Dorothy was refilling his water bowl when she heard the scramble of paws on tile. She turned to find him upright, legs splayed wide, body swaying, but vertical, standing. He looked as surprised as she felt. "Easy," she said, setting down the bowl. "Easy now. Don't push it." His back legs buckled. He went down hard, shoulder hitting the floor with a thump that made Dorothy wince. But his eyes were different now, not empty. Something flickered behind them. Frustration, maybe, or determination. He tried again the next day, and the day after that. Dorothy found herself talking to him constantly, not the way people talk to pets' baby voices and silly names. She talked to him the way she used to talk to Harold, narrating her day, complaining about the weather, wondering aloud about the price of groceries. "They want $4 for a dozen eggs now. $4. I remember when it was 60 cents. Harold would have had a fit." Max's ears swiveled toward her voice. His tail twitched against the blankets. She told him about the garden, about how it used to look, back when Harold was alive to tend it, the roses he had planted for their 25th anniversary, the vegetable patch that gave them more tomatoes than they could ever eat. "We used to give bags of them to the neighbors. Everyone on the street got tomatoes in August. Mrs. Patterson made sauce. The Hendricks boy, he's a pharmacist now. Can you imagine he used to eat them right off the vine?" Max watched her, listened, his head tilted slightly when her voice changed pitch, on day 16, he walked, not far, not steadily, but he followed her from the laundry room to the kitchen, legs shaking with each step, pausing every few feet to rest. Dorothy walked ahead of him, slow and patient, resisting the urge to help. "That's it? Come on, you can do it." He made it to the threshold of the kitchen before his legs gave out. Dorothy lowered herself to the floor beside him, her own knees protesting, her back seizing, and sat there while he caught his breath. "Not bad," she said. "Not bad at all." His tail wagged. Weak, but unmistakable. The third week. Sarah called. Dorothy was in the backyard when the phone rang. She had started going out there in the afternoons, sitting on the porch steps while Max lay in the grass nearby. The sun seemed to help him. His fur was growing back in patches, and the sores on his belly had finally closed. She made it inside by the fourth ring. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "Fine, honey. You sound out of breath." "I was outside." A pause. "Outside? You never go outside." Dorothy looked through the window at Max, who had lifted his head at the sound of the door closing. "I do now." She told Sarah about the dog, about finding him at the dump, bringing him home, nursing him back from the edge of death. The words came out in a rush, more than she had said to her daughter in months. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, you adopted a stray at your age." "I didn't adopt him. I just didn't leave him there." "What if he turns on you? What if he bites you're alone in that house?" "He won't." "How do you know?" Dorothy watched Max through the window. He had put his head back down, but his eyes were still fixed on the door, waiting for her to come back. "I just do," she said. The call ended badly. Sarah's voice had gone tight, the way it did when she was worried but trying not to show it. Dorothy set the phone down and stood in the kitchen, listening to the radio play its endless loop of old songs. She had not turned it off in weeks, but she had stopped hearing it. When she went back outside, Max struggled to his feet. He walked to her slowly, carefully, but without stumbling, and pressed his head against her thigh. Dorothy's hand found the top of his skull. The fur there was soft now, new growth coming in thick and dark. "She's just scared," Dorothy told him. "People get scared when they don't understand." Max leaned into her touch. By the end of the 6th week, Max was eating regular meals, dry kibble mixed with canned food, twice a day. Dorothy had driven to the pet store in Harrisburg for supplies, the same Harrisburg where Sarah wanted to put her in a home. She bought a proper bed, a leash, a collar. Blue. Because Harold had always liked blue. Max wore it without complaint. He followed her through the house now, keeping a few feet of distance but always present, always watching. The laundry room became his bedroom, but he spent his days wherever Dorothy went, kitchen, living room, porch. She started working on the garden, not seriously, just pulling a weed here and there while Max lay in the grass. Her knees could not take much, and her back screamed after 10 minutes of bending. But the motion felt good, the dirt under her nails, the smell of earth and green things. One afternoon, she cleared enough space around the old rose bushes to see their roots. Still alive, still reaching down into the soil, waiting for someone to give them room to grow. Dorothy sat back on her heels, breathing hard. Max walked over and sniffed the roses. Then he looked at her, head tilted, as if asking a question. "I know," she said. "It's a mess, but we'll get there." The first time Max ran, Dorothy cried. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. She had opened the back door to let him out, and he had stood at the threshold the way he always did, sniffing the air, checking the yard. Then something caught his attention. A squirrel. Maybe a bird. He bolted. Not fast, not the way a healthy dog would run, but his legs stretched out beneath him. His body lengthened. His paws struck the grass in rhythm. He ran from the porch to the fence and back again, tongue hanging, tail high. Dorothy stood on the steps, one hand gripping the railing, and felt the tears come before she could stop them. She did not wipe them away. That night, sitting on the sofa with a book she was not reading, she felt something warm press against her knee. Max had come to her. He stood beside the couch, head level with her lap, eyes on her face. She froze. He had never done this before, never approached her for contact. She reached out, slowly, and rested her hand on his head. He sighed a long, deep exhale and lowered his chin onto her thigh. They stayed like that for a long time. The house quiet around them, the radio finally silent. "Yeah," Dorothy whispered. "Me too, boy." 2 days later, the phone rang. Not Sarah this time, the area code was local. Dorothy answered. "Mrs. Miller, this is Dr. Brennan's office. We received a call about a German Shepherd you've been treating at home. Someone reported concerns about the animal's welfare. We'd like to schedule a visit to assess the situation." The line went quiet, waiting for her response. Dorothy looked at Max. He looked back at her. Someone had called. Dr. Brennan came to the house on a Tuesday. Dorothy had spent the morning cleaning, scrubbing the laundry room floor, washing Max's bedding, arranging her medical supplies in neat rows on the counter. Evidence, she thought. Proof that she knew what she was doing. The vet was younger than she expected. 40, maybe. He drove a white pickup with his clinic's name on the door and carried a worn leather bag that reminded her of the doctor who used to make house calls when she was a girl. He knelt beside Max in the living room, running his hands along the dog's spine, checking his teeth, listening to his heart with a stethoscope. Max held still through all of it. His eyes stayed fixed on Dorothy. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Brennan said finally, sitting back on his heels, "I have to be honest. When I got the call, I expected to find a very different situation." Dorothy's hands tightened in her lap. "And what do you find?" He looked at Max, then at her. "I find a dog who should be dead. And his wounds are healing cleanly. His weight is coming back. His vitals are strong." He shook his head. "Whoever reported you, I don't know what they thought they saw, but this dog is being cared for. That's clear." The relief hit Dorothy so hard she had to grip the arm of the chair. Dr. Brennan left her with antibiotics, a deworming tablet, and instructions to bring Max to the clinic for a proper checkup when he was stronger. He also left his card. "Call me if anything changes," he said at the door. "And Mrs. Miller, whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." That night, Dorothy sat on the porch with Max beside her. The autumn air had turned cool, carrying the smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. She rested her hand on his head and let herself breathe. Someone had called, but it had not mattered. They had come, and they had seen, and they had left her alone. For now, that was enough. The fall happened 6 weeks later. December had come early that year, the way it sometimes did in Pennsylvania. Frost on the windows in the morning, the furnace running constantly. Dorothy had started keeping a space heater in the laundry room for Max, though he spent most nights in her bedroom now, curled on a blanket at the foot of her bed. She was coming down the stairs with a basket of laundry when her foot caught the edge of the runner. The world tilted. Her hands grabbed for the railing and missed. Then she was falling, the basket flying, sheets and towels scattering, her hip slamming into the edge of a step with a crack she felt more than heard. She landed at the bottom. The ceiling swam above her. Pain bloomed from her right side, hot and sharp, radiating down her leg and up into her ribs. Max appeared at the top of the stairs. He barked the first time she had heard him bark since bringing him home. Sharp, urgent, over and over. "I'm okay," She tried to say. The words came out as a gasp. She could not get up. Every time she tried to push herself vertical, the pain drove her back down. Her arms shook. Her vision grayed at the edges. The phone. The kitchen. 20 feet away. Dorothy began to crawl. Max came down the stairs, stepping carefully around her. He walked beside her as she dragged herself across the floor, whimpering softly, his nose brushing her shoulder. The phone hung on the wall by the refrigerator. Dorothy reached up, grabbed the cord, pulled the receiver down. Her fingers found the buttons. 9, 1, 1, 9, 1, 1. What's your emergency? I fell, she said. I can't get up. Please, there's a dog. Someone needs to take care of my dog. The ambulance came. 2 young paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher while Max watched from the corner of the kitchen. Body tense, a low growl building in his throat. Easy, boy, Dorothy said. Easy. It's okay. But it was not okay, and they both knew it. Her neighbor Walter appeared in the doorway, 78 years old, widowed like her, still wearing his bathrobe. He had seen the ambulance from his window. The dog, Dorothy said as they carried her out. Please, Walter, feed him, let him out, just until I get back. Walter nodded. I'll take care of him, Mrs. Miller. You just worry about yourself. The hospital kept her for 3 days. No broken bones. The doctor said, severe bruising to the hip and lower back. They wanted to monitor her, make sure there was no internal bleeding, run tests on her bone density and her balance and her heart. Dorothy lay in the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about Max. Sarah arrived on the 2nd day. She had taken a red-eye from Chicago, her face pale with exhaustion and something else, something that looked like fear, but felt like anger. This is exactly what I was worried about. Mom. Dorothy watched her daughter pace the small room, back and forth, like a caged animal. You're alone in that house. Now there's a dog astray. Mom, a stray you picked up from a dump and you fall down the stairs and no one is there. Max didn't push me. That's not the point. Sarah stopped pacing. Her hands gripped the rail at the foot of the bed. The point is, you need help. You can't keep living like this. Dorothy said nothing. I've been looking at places, good places. There's one in Harrisburg with a garden view, activities, other people your age. No. Mom, please, just listen. Some of them even allow small pets. Max isn't a small pet. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then maybe we need to find him somewhere else. A family. Kids who can run around with him. A big yard. Dorothy looked at her daughter. Really looked. She saw the girl who used to crawl into her lap during thunderstorms. The teenager who slammed doors and said hateful things and then cried in her mother's arms at midnight. The woman who had built a life 1,000 miles away and only called on Sundays because it was easier than admitting she did not know what to say. You want to give away my dog. I want you to be safe. Those aren't the same thing. On the 3rd day, Walter came to visit. He sat in the plastic chair beside her bed, turning his cap in his hands. His face was grave. Mrs. Miller, I have to tell you something. The dog, Max, he won't eat. I put food out, fresh water, everything you said, he won't touch it. Dorothy's chest tightened. Nothing. Nothing. He just sits by the front door, won't move except to go out and do his business, then right back to the door. Walter shook his head. It's like he's waiting for something. That afternoon, the doctor signed her discharge papers. Sarah stood by the door with her coat on, car keys in hand. I've already talked to Michael. We think you should come stay with me for a while. The house can wait. We'll figure out the dog situation. I'm going home. Mom. Dorothy pushed herself up from the bed. Her hips screamed. Her back spasmed. She did not care. I'm going home. My home. To my dog. Sarah's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to cry when things did not go her way. I know you're scared, Dorothy said. Her voice was steady now. I'm scared, too. But that dog sat by the door for 3 days waiting for me. I won't be one more person who doesn't come back. Max was waiting at the door. Dorothy opened it, and he was there standing. Not sitting. His whole body trembling with something she could not name. His tail moved so fast it blurred. A sound came from his throat, high and broken, not quite a whine, not quite a cry. She lowered herself to her knees. The pain in her hip flared white-hot. She did not care. Max pressed his head into her chest. His body shook against hers. She wrapped her arms around him and held on while Sarah stood behind them in the doorway. Silent. For one moment, everything was all right. Then the moment ended. The first week back. Dorothy tried to prove she could manage. She woke at dawn, made her bed, fed Max, let him out, let him in, made breakfast, washed dishes, each task a small victory, each victory harder than the last. Her hip would not cooperate. The bruising had faded to yellow and green, but something deeper had shifted, something the doctors could not see on their scans. She walked with a limp now, had to grip furniture when she moved from room to room, had to rest after climbing the stairs. She could not bend to fill Max's food bowl without her back seizing, could not walk him to the end of the driveway without stopping twice to catch her breath, could not kneel in the garden the way she had been doing, pulling weeds and clearing space. The garden went untended. The weeds crept back. Max watched her struggle. She saw it in his eyes, the way he tracked her movements, the way he stayed close when she walked, ready to catch her if she fell. But he was a dog. He could not help her. No one could help her. One morning, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. An old woman stared back, hunched, gray, holding onto the wall like it was the only thing keeping her upright. When had she become this? She looked away. Could not stand to see herself. Sarah called every day now, every single day, morning and evening, checking in. The conversations followed a script. Did you eat? Yes. Did you take your medication? Yes. Did you fall? No. That last one was a lie. Dorothy had fallen twice since coming home, once in the bathroom, catching herself on the towel rack, once in the kitchen, going down hard on her bad hip. She had lain on the cold tile both times, staring at the ceiling, unable to get up without crawling to a chair and pulling herself vertical. Max had stood over her, whimpering, helpless. She was helpless too. The call came on a Thursday. Sarah's voice was different this time, careful, measured, the voice she used when she had already made a decision and was waiting for permission to announce it. Mom, I talked to Dr. Brennan. Dorothy's hand tightened on the phone. I called his office, explained the situation, your fall, your hip, everything. He said he can help find Max a good home, a family in Lancaster. They have land, other dogs, kids who can run around with him. He would be happy there. Mom. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. You had no right. I'm trying to help. You had no right to call him, no right to make decisions about my dog behind my back. Mom, listen to yourself. Sarah's voice cracked. You can barely walk. You can barely take care of yourself. How are you supposed to take care of a 70-pound animal? This isn't sustainable. You know it isn't. Dorothy opened her mouth to argue. Nothing came out, because Sarah was right. She hung up without saying goodbye. That night, Dorothy did not turn on the lights. She sat in the living room, in Harold's old chair, while darkness filled the house around her. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on her slippers. The radio played from the kitchen. She had never turned it off, but the music sounded far away, like it was coming from another house, another life. She looked down at Max, at the fur that had grown back thick and glossy, at the body that had filled out, muscle replacing bone, at the eyes that watched her now with something like worry. She had done that. She had brought him back from the edge of death, had cleaned his wounds and fed him and talked to him through the long nights when neither of them could sleep, and now she could not even bend down to fill his water bowl. The thought settled into her chest like a weight she could not lift. What was I thinking? She was 71 years old. Her body was failing. Her children wanted to put her in a home. And she had convinced herself that she could save this dog, that saving him would somehow save her too. But she could not save anyone. She could barely get out of a chair. Max lifted his head. His eyes found hers in the darkness. Dorothy remembered the day she had found him. The chain around his neck, the empty water bowl, the flat, dead look in his eyes. She had recognized that look. That was why she stopped. That was why she could not drive away. But recognition was not rescue, and wanting to help was not the same as being able to. Maybe Sarah is right. Maybe a family with land and children would give him a better life than this, better than an old woman who falls down and can't get up. Tears slid down her cheeks. She did not wipe them. Max stood. He walked to her and put his head in her lap. His nose was wet against her palm. "I'm sorry, boy," she whispered. She could not say the rest. The radio played on. The house grew darker, and somewhere in the back of Dorothy's mind, a question formed small and cold and impossible to ignore. If I let him go, what reason do I have left to stay? Dorothy woke with her eyes swollen shut. She lay in bed, listening to the house settle around her. The furnace hummed, a branch scraped against the window. Somewhere downstairs, Max's nails clicked on the hardwood floor. She had made her decision in the dark hours before dawn, lying awake, staring at nothing, running the numbers in her head, her age, her body, her limitations. The math did not work. It had never worked. She had just been too stubborn to see it. Today she would call Dr. Brennan. Today she would ask about the family in Lancaster, the one with land and children and other dogs. Today she would do the right thing, the responsible thing. She pushed herself up. Her hip throbbed. Her back seized. She waited for the pain to dull, then swung her legs over the side of the bed. The stairs took forever, one step at a time, both hands on the railing, pausing on each landing to catch her breath. By the time she reached the bottom, sweat had dampened her nightgown. Max was waiting. He stood at the foot of the stairs, the way he always did. But something was different this morning. His tail did not wag, his body did not wiggle with excitement. He just stood there, watching her with his head tilted slightly to one side. Dorothy looked into his eyes. They were clear now, not clouded with pain or dull with resignation, the way they had been when she found him. These were bright eyes, alert eyes. The eyes of a dog who had learned to trust again. He knew. She could not explain how, but he knew. "Come on," she said. Her voice came out rough. "Let's get you some breakfast." But Max did not follow her to the kitchen. Instead, he walked to the back door, stopped, looked at her over his shoulder. Dorothy frowned. "You need to go out." She crossed the kitchen, unlocked the door, pushed it open. The morning air hit her face cold, clean, smelling of frost and dead leaves. December had settled in properly now. The garden was a tangle of brown stalks and bare branches. Max stepped onto the porch. Then he stopped again. He was not looking at the yard. He was looking at her, waiting. Dorothy hesitated. She had not been outside in days. The cold made her hip ache. The uneven ground made her balance worse. There was no reason to go out there. But Max waited, patient, still. She pulled Harold's old coat from the hook by the door, wrapped it around her shoulders, stepped out onto the porch. The cold bit through her nightgown, through the coat, down to her bones. Her slippers were thin against the frozen boards. Every instinct told her to go back inside, to call Dr. Brennan and get this over with. Max walked across the yard, not to his usual spot by the fence, not to the corner where he liked to dig. He walked to the old rose bushes, the ones Harold had planted for their anniversary, the ones Dorothy had started clearing before she fell. He sat down beside them, looked at her. Dorothy's breath caught that spot, that exact spot. She used to sit there with Harold on summer evenings, watching the fireflies rise from the grass. She had pulled her first weed there, months ago, when Max was still too weak to walk. She made her way across the yard. Slowly, carefully. Her hips screamed with each step. Her slippers grew damp from the frost-covered grass. By the time she reached the roses, she was shaking. She lowered herself to the ground beside Max. The earth was hard beneath her. Ice crystals glittered on the dead leaves. Her fingers were already going numb. But Max pressed his warm body against her side. His head came to rest on her thigh. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. Dorothy looked at the roses, at the tangled weeds, at the garden that had gone wild in the years since Harold died. Then she looked at Max, at the fur that had grown back thick and dark, at the muscle that had replaced bone, at the eyes that watched her with something she could only call devotion. She had done that, her shaking hands, her aching back, her failing body. She had pulled him from the edge of death, and he had pulled her back too. She could see it now, the morning he first wagged his tail, the afternoon he followed her to the kitchen, the night he put his head in her lap and let her cry without asking why. "I'm not done." The thought arrived without warning. Simple, clear, true. Neither is he. Dorothy looked at the roses again, looked at the weeds choking their roots, looked at her hands still trembling, still old, still hers. She was not going to call Dr. Brennan. She was not going to give Max away. She was not going to let Sarah move her into some room in Harrisburg where she would sit by a window and wait to die. She was going to stay here, in this house, with this dog, for as long as she had left. "All right, boy," she said. Her voice was steady now. "Let's see how much garden we can fix before these knees give out." Max's tail thumped against the frozen ground. Dorothy reached out. Her fingers found a weed dead, brown, its roots shallow in the hard earth. She pulled. It came free. She reached for another and another. Max stood, walked a few feet away, lay down in a patch of weak winter sunlight, watching her work. Dorothy pulled weeds until her fingers went numb, until her back refused to bend anymore, until the small pile beside her had grown to something that almost looked like progress. Then she heard the back door open. She turned. A figure stood on the porch, coat on, suitcase at her feet. Sarah. Her daughter stared at her across the frozen yard, at the old woman kneeling in the dirt, at the dog lying in the winter sun, at the small patch of garden that should not have mattered but somehow did. Neither of them spoke. Sarah crossed the yard without speaking. She stopped at the edge of the rose bushes, looked down at her mother kneeling in the frozen dirt, fingers red with cold, Harold's old coat hanging loose on her shoulders. "Mom, what are you doing?" Dorothy did not get up. "Weeding." "It's December. Weeds don't care what month it is." Sarah stood there for a long moment. Her breath made clouds in the cold air. Her eyes moved from Dorothy to Max to the small patch of cleared earth. Then, she did something Dorothy did not expect. She knelt down beside her. The frozen ground creaked under her weight. Her nice coat pressed into the dirt. She reached out, grabbed a dead weed, and pulled. "You're going to ruin those pants," Dorothy said. "I have other pants." They worked in silence, side by side, mother and daughter. The cold bit at their fingers. The sun climbed higher, weak but present. Max watched from his spot in the grass, tail thumping occasionally against the ground. When Dorothy's back finally refused to bend anymore, Sarah helped her up. They walked inside together slowly, carefully. Sarah's hand under her mother's elbow, at the door. Sarah stopped. "I'm sorry," she said. "About the call to Dr. Brennan, about trying to... I was scared. Mom, I didn't know what else to do." Dorothy looked at her daughter, at the lines around her eyes that had not been there 10 years ago, at the gray threading through her hair, at the fear still flickering behind her composure. "I know," Dorothy said. "I was scared, too." Sarah stayed for a week. She did not mention Harrisburg, did not mention assisted living or rehoming Max. She cooked meals, helped with laundry, sat on the porch with her mother while Max lay at their feet. On the last day, she stood in the driveway with her suitcase. "Michael wants to come visit," she said. "In the spring. He wants to see the garden. And Max..." Dorothy nodded. "That'd be real nice." Sarah hugged her tight, longer than usual. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "Take care of yourself, Mom." "I will." The car pulled away. Dorothy stood in the driveway until it disappeared around the corner. Max pressed against her leg, warm and solid. "Come on, boy," she said. "Let's go inside." Spring came slow that year. The snow melted in patches. The ground softened. Green shoots pushed up through the dead leaves. Tentative at first, then bold. Dorothy worked in the garden every day the weather allowed. Not for long her hip still ached. Her back still seized. But she cleared another foot. Then another. By April, the rose bushes stood free of weeds for the first time in years. Max lay nearby while she worked. His fur had thickened over the winter, glossy and dark. He still flinched at loud noises, a car backfiring, a door slamming. But each time, he looked at Dorothy and she said, "Just a truck, boy," and he settled. Some wounds healed, some left scars. That was how it worked. On a morning in late April, Dorothy sat on the porch with her coffee. One cup. The mug she used to set out for Harold stayed in the cabinet now. She did not think about it anymore. Max lay at her feet, nose twitching at the breeze. The garden stretched out before them, not perfect. Not the way it had been when Harold was alive, but alive. Roses bloomed in scattered clusters. Weeds grew in the corners she could not reach. It was messy and incomplete, and hers. The radio in the kitchen was silent. She had turned it off weeks ago. The quiet did not bother her now. She looked at Harold's chair. Still there, still empty. But she did not see the emptiness anymore. She saw past it at the garden, at the sky, at the dog who had come back from death and brought her with him. Her hand found Max's head, his eyes closed, his tail moved once against the boards. Well, Harold found something for these old hands after all. Somewhere down the street, church bells rang. Sunday, 10 o'clock. The phone would ring soon. Sarah, checking in. The conversations were longer now, 20 minutes, sometimes more. They talked about the garden, about Max, about nothing in particular. Dorothy did not know how many more springs she had. Nobody did. But this spring, she was here. Max was here. The roses were blooming. She lifted her coffee cup, took a sip, set it down. The sun warmed her face. Max sighed in his sleep. That was enough. If you have stayed until now, you've carried something with me. Perhaps it felt familiar, the weight of a quiet house, the ache of hands that tremble more than they used to, the question of whether anyone still needs us here. These are not small things. They sit heavy in the chest, and they do not ask permission to stay. Many of us know what it is to feel unseen, to wonder if our best days have already passed, to love something or someone without knowing if it matters to anyone but ourselves. We carry these things quietly, the way we were taught to carry most things, without complaint, without explanation, without expecting anyone to notice. It is all right if this story did not answer anything for you. Some things are not meant to be resolved. They are meant to be witnessed, to be held for a moment, then set down gently, the way we set down a letter we have read too many times. You do not need to do anything with what you felt. You are allowed to simply let it rest. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end.